We're grateful to have you with us for today's webinar as we commemorate Yom Hashoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Today, we will explore the role of art as a means of education, reflection, and remembrance. Yom Hashoah was established in Israel in 1959. It falls on the 27th of the Jewish month of Nisan, a date specifically chosen because it is the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. On this day, we remember the 6 million Jews who were lost in the Holocaust, as well as those who engaged in the acts of resistance and those who survived this dark period of history. Art created by victims and survivors of genocide can often depict the complex human responses to persecution, and public memorial art can serve as a visual reminder to never forget. Today, we will be hearing from 3 individuals whose lives have intersected with the Holocaust and education in different ways, each with their own unique story to tell. When we engage in Holocaust education, now law in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire, we provide a way for the next generation to learn from the past. Art is just one way we can fulfill ADL's mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. We often think about this from the educator's point of view, but today we are fortunate, lucky to hear from students. We spoke with 8th graders at the Epstein Hillel School in Marblehead, Massachusetts, who spoke about the importance of Holocaust education.
I think Holocaust education is important because we cannot let something like that happen again.
Because there's been an uprising of antisemitism in a lot of countries, including the United States, so it's very scary to think about.
I think the Holocaust could happen again because anything is possible. And people are denying that it really happened.
If you don't want history to repeat itself, and having the knowledge of what could happen and what still might happen is the one way that you can help prevent the bad parts of history from repeating itself.
If everyone is educated in what really happened to all the victims of the Holocaust, then people will be more motivated to try to prevent it from happening again.
And as there are more and more generations, we need to include every detail so that they know what our ancestors went through.
Those who learn about it will know what not to do in the future.
And we need to continue educating people on anti-Semitism and the Holocaust to make sure it never happens again.
Wow, the insights from these students are a real inspiration for each of us, regardless of our generation and background. We're now going to turn to our panelists, 3 leaders in Holocaust education and the arts. We welcome Cheryl Ratner-Price, the co-founder and executive director of the Butterfly Project, an impactful program we will hear more about today that emphasizes the healing power of art and memorial making to build connection and community. We also welcome my friend, Tufts professor and ADL board member, Dr. Barbara Wallace-Grossman, a theater historian, voice specialist, director, and author whose interests include Holocaust and genocide-related theater and film arts advocacy. And it is my privilege to welcome my friend, Kadi Preston, a tireless advocate for Holocaust education and a Holocaust survivor. Kadi serves with me on New Hampshire's Holocaust and Genocide Education Commission and travels to schools across the region, libraries, and other venues to share her story of hope and survival, and is an incredible inspiration for the next generation. So welcome, everyone. It's my honor to be moderating this important discussion. I want to start with you, Cheryl. This week, the students at the Epstein Hillel School in Marblehead and the Hampton School in New Hampshire painted butterflies, each one in memory of a Holocaust victim. And you're really the force behind this project. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What is it? What inspired you to create it? Because it's clearly taking off. It's having an impact. And, what do you want teachers and people who are listening to know about it?
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here and, to be always aware of my initial fear and hesitation to get involved in working around the Holocaust. As an artist, I felt I was too sensitive. There's no way I could do something like this. And an educator, Jan Landau, who's my co-founder for the Butterfly Project, convinced me that she was counting on me, that I just had to do it. And so I, began gaining a little bit of courage and getting to know survivors. And I felt my contribution as an artist could be to inspire other people to also take a little chance and begin working with the stories and the history and the pain, but finding a way to honor and recognize the children that were killed through the painting of the ceramic butterflies. Ceramics is my background. And little did I know that I would be here 16 years later. And it's been an amazing, incredible community of educators and students all these years.
How many schools, how many students?
Since we've begun, we're approaching 400 schools, and we're a little organization. We're not a big bureaucratic organization. We're based in San Diego. And we sort of, hand off the torch to other schools and organizations. And we're very proud of how loyal our teachers every year. Most of them come back every year, and then more schools. And then they start to go deeper into the school, multiple grade levels, and, mixing together with different resources. And so we are approaching the 300,000 mark for butterflies. Wow. And each one of them is hand painted one at a time. So every student's fingerprint is joining with the memory of the child that they're honoring. So it isn't fast. We love paper clips, but they're not paper clips. And here we are, and we're never going to stop. Even when we reach 1.5 million for the children, there's no reason to stop. We all know how important this education is.
So really incredible. And I just want to highlight, like, the word you used at the beginning was, having the courage to do it, and sort of like taking those steps. And now look at the impact, how many students, and like all of those students are connected to families and lives and communities. So it's great. Really, really, really great. And I'm just glad we can help highlight this program today.
Thank you.
Kadi, I want to turn to you. You were instrumental in getting legislation passed in New Hampshire. I remember when we were together, at the State House in Massachusetts. You also came from New Hampshire to testify here. We serve on this commission together, and you're one of probably the most important and public voices on the importance of Holocaust and genocide education, in New England, especially in New Hampshire. Tell us a little bit, like, why is this so important? Like, I know that it's part of what drives you, but tell everyone why it's so important and what drives you.
Well, it's important for several reasons. First of all, the new generation that is in schools now is incredibly receptive. They are a different generation. Maybe because of the internet, they're more open, they're more compassionate. And when I speak to them, there's a tremendous connection. And I really truly feel that every time you reach these children, you spread a sort of goodwill and knowledge and history. And it's very important. When the governor signed this into law, I was actually quite surprised that we got it through so fast, because I know Massachusetts has been trying for a long time, right?
Well, we've got it done. Governor Baker in Massachusetts has signed it. So
Congratulations. When did that happen?
Earlier this year.
wonderful. But I remember being so frustrated because I realized that it wasn't happening in our state either. And it's so wonderful that our governor is so on board with this. Not only is he on board, but he goes with me once a month to a different district, to a school, and we speak together. We do this wonderful double act. He speaks first and then I speak, and he's been incredibly supportive. And I also found when that thing was signed into law, I felt that my whole family of 28 dead people were behind me, holding my shoulders. It was an incredibly emotional moment for me. I'm a sole survivor of a family of 28 Jews. And it's very important. For me, it's personally very important. But I also feel that, the Holocaust, it's not just my tragedy, it's a human tragedy. I don't want to just own it myself. Everybody owns it. Genocide is everybody's. It's not just our tragedy. And it's what I tell the children is that you don't have to be a Jew to care about this. You have to be a human being, which is more important. And the only way I can see this happening is with education. I ran a theater company for 33 years, unfortunately died during COVID. And we did shows all over the United States. And I know the impact that theater can have on children. But if you direct these children into the right venue, it's amazing how much benefit it can have. I've also written a couple of books, and I have a new book. I want to show it to you. I'm very proud
Tell
of it.
Tell us the name of your new book.
It's called Hidden. And it's a graphic novel. It's about to be published, and I hope to get it into curriculum. It's for middle schools. I feel middle schools don't have enough books. We have a lot of books for older children, but very few for middle schools. And it looks like it's going to be very, very well received, and I'm very happy about it. I do what I can. I'm 83, sorry, 83. That happened last week. And I don't have a lot of time left, but I'm desperate to get as much as I can out into the public with these children. And honestly, it works. It really works because they're amazing. And I mean, even the governor, one of the kids asked him at one of the meetings, how come you signed this into law, this genocide and Holocaust thing? And he said, because it's a no-brainer. And that it is a no-brainer. And I wish everybody would see that. Education, education, education.
Well, thank you. I give you my sort of personal and professional appreciation because we know each other and work together. But I know you're 83. You said it, so I can kind of repeat it.
You can say it.
But I know that you are out there all the time, and you're doing everything you possibly can to educate the next generation. So thank you. And your books are gonna live on for a long time. So
thank you.
So you also mentioned the sort of theater, which I think is a good segue for Barbara, because you've actually led a number of productions at Tufts and elsewhere that explore the intersection of Holocaust education and art. Tell us a little bit. I mean, you have a lot of experience in the area, but tell us what drew you to this genre, and maybe also you could share a little bit, like Kadi's talking about how her students receive it. How do your students receive it? Because you're obviously working with an older student population.
Sure. Thank you so much, Robert. And it's really a pleasure to be on this panel with you, Kati, and Cheryl, and you, Robert. I have a PhD in theater, and I'm a professor at Tufts. And I had always been drawn to the Holocaust. I'm not a child of survivors. I'm not a grandchild of survivors. I know that my family had distant relatives in Poland and the Ukraine who were swept up in the cataclysm. But I remember once saying to Sonia Schreiber-Weitz of blessed memory at a gathering of survivors, I said, Sonia, I don't really belong here. I'm not a survivor. She said, Barbara, you belong here. You belong here. And I've always just felt what you said, Kati, about the responsibility, both as a Jew and as a human being, to really take whatever opportunity I could to help educate the next generation. I mean, I grew up in the era where you learned about the Holocaust. There were six death camps, then it was over and never again. And I think we all know, number one, how incorrect that narrative was, because there were actually thousands of camps in the Nazi horror system, not all death camps, of course. And we all only have to turn on CNN to look at what's happening in the Ukraine to know that genocide is still happening. But I felt, for me, it was a trip to Israel, it was a trip to Treblinka and to Auschwitz. It was involvement with Facing History and Ourselves. It was involvement with the United States Holocaust Museum. Actually, Kitty Dukakis, wife of then Governor Michael Dukakis, asked my husband and me to chair what was the first state dinner to raise money for the Holocaust Museum. We were the first dinner in 1985. In 1985, we raised $1 million in one night. And through that event, I met a lot of people in the Boston survivor community, and I just was so touched by everybody's story and by the power of community. And then I was involved, Steve and I were both involved in the creation of the New England Holocaust Memorial. I was on the design management committee. Steve and I co-chaired the dedication of it in 1995, the rededication in 2005. Okay, so then I was appointed to the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, and I got to a point where I just said, man, I wasn't teaching it, I wasn't directing it. I said, if I don't do something as an educator to bring this into my professional life. So that's when I did an intensive summer workshop at Facing History, created a course called Imagining the Holocaust on Stage and Screen, because in the early 2000s, there was a spike in anti-Semitism locally, globally, nationally, just as there is now. But I felt a sense of urgency about doing what I could through the lens of theater and film. So I created that course. And then my emphasis was kind of on chronicling the history through the lens of theater and film. I then created Confronting Genocide on Stage and Screen, and I've revived.
Tell us a little bit about, like,
okay,
Confronting Genocide on Stage and Screen.
Let me come back to the Holocaust, because I do it through plays that we read, films that we see, as well as poetry, but also in terms of directing. Well, I was in a production called Cabaret at the End of the World that we did at Tufts, that was created by our then Hillel Rabbi Jeffrey Summit, who's an ethnomusicologist, where we performed songs and sketches that were done in ghettos and camps to make people understand that people were still making art during the Holocaust. People were still defying what was happening, as much as to create a sense of normalcy. So we performed that. I did an evening of Yiddish song. I directed a play called Our Class by a Polish playwright, Tadeusz Szwabodzayanek, who said, I'm a Polish Catholic. I grew up hearing that the history was black and white, that the Nazis killed the Jews, the Poles were innocent. He said, now I realize the history of the Poles and the Jews is blood red. And so he wrote a play, Our Class, which follows a group of 10 school children from kindergarten into their 80s, although they all don't make it into their 80s. And it focuses on what happened in Jedwabne, where, like so many shtetls and towns in Eastern Europe, they got swept up in the Holocaust, swept up in the maelstrom. In that particular town, the Jews were herded into a barn and burned alive. So we did that. And what's fascinating, not only the impact on my students who were in it and our audiences, but I got an email from someone who works with kids in East Boston. She had brought a group of immigrant children today, students of color who had never heard of the Holocaust. And they were so riveted by what they saw that they wanted to learn as much as they could about the Holocaust. So fast forward to this year, when I revived my Holocaust course, and I had a class, I had to turn people away. And I had some students who, Jewish day school, they've made multiple trips to Europe to see to be at the death camps. I had other kids who said, I went to a really fine private school in New York. We spent one day on the Holocaust, one day in my European history class, one day, I had a student from China who said, I've heard about the Holocaust, but I don't know anything about the Holocaust. So, I mean, it ran the gamut. And people, the change that I made this time, and stop me, Robert, if I'm exceeding my time limit, was that yes, we chronicle the Holocaust as it unfolded, but the emphasis was on telling stories, sharing stories, which is what theater does best. It was about the storytelling, about the stories of resilience, courage, defiance, tenacity, much like what's happening with theaters in the Ukraine, people creating in their bomb shelters right now plays. But anyway, so
I mean, I think that's like important. It's a theme. I mean, each of you spoken for a few minutes. You know, we're into this discussion, and the telling of stories, whether it's in the doing the butterflies or Kari or your work, it's definitely a theme. And then the other thing that I'm hearing that I think is absolutely critical is you don't need to be Jewish to learn about this.
that's right.
And the fact that so many people either have never heard of the Holocaust or know very, very little, I think speaks to the need for both the legislative piece for those people who are wondering why is this important, like the student who asked Kari the question, but the need for education at all levels, and that's it happens at every level, and I think we. So I'll just sort of compliment all of you because all of you are actually doing this work and in some ways reaching different audiences.
Mm.
And collectively that can make a big difference. Did you want to, I want to jump to Kari, but Barbara, did you want to have a last word on that?
Well, I was just going to say that people have different ways of learning and of processing experiences. So for some people, seeing a play or hearing a poem or making a painting will have a far deeper effect than perhaps reading a chapter in a textbook. I mean, it just grab for anything we can, really.
It's a great point because even like as adults, as parents, as educators, we need to be flexible. People learn and take in information in different ways. And some people are going to do it through a graphic novel. Some people are going to do it, through art, and some people may do it, through theater.
Can I just say one thing? I feel strongly, though, that the art cannot trivialize the Holocaust. It cannot sentimentalize it. It cannot oversimplify it. And I think that kids are very capable of grasping more complexity than some people think they can. So for me, the standard has to be authenticity and absolutely not trivializing or demeaning in any way.
Kari, you were just recently at the Hampstead Middle School with Governor Sununu, and I know you're also an artist. Tell us a little bit about how do children process and remember the Holocaust, and a little bit about the experience. Take people into that school building when you were there.
Well, what I do is I tell them my story from the point of view of a little girl who went through it. I was 5 years old when I went through the Holocaust. I was hidden. I was hunted. My family were murdered. And I tell the children a story, but I don't make it sad. I make jokes sometimes. I tell them from the point of view of a child. And at the end, I explain to them that the reason I'm telling them this story is not to make them sad for me. I'm very happy. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm thrilled. I have 4 sons and 4 granddaughters. And every time I had a baby, it was giving the finger to Hitler. It was wonderful. And I tell these children that, yes, you can get over terrible things. The main thing is that we don't do it again. We don't do it to other people, because they did this to me as a Jew. I was only a half Jew and they did it to me. My mother was Catholic. My father was Jewish. They still wanted to kill me. You don't know who's going to persecute who. And this is where I explain that the Holocaust is a human tragedy and make sure that your family and your people will not suffer through this. And the only way you can do this is to spread the knowledge to people and to be kind, because basically, uh, Hitler was bullying on steroids. And I tell the children to do one good little thing every day. And I love to quote to them plays that we did. There was a wonderful play that we did called Little Bits of Light. That was about Theresienstadt. And it was basically one of the children who in Theresienstadt was actually a German Jewish boy who didn't know he was Jewish until he was interned there. And the conflict that he had as somebody who thought he was German and now being persecuted as a Jew. And this showed the children that it can intersect. Prejudice can intersect. It's not exclusive. It's not an exclusive thing, and it's to be watched carefully. And the only thing they can do is fight it and do it with hope. And all is not lost. I'm a great believer in the Hebrew expression of tikkun olam, mending the world. I tell them, look, you don't have to destroy things. Just mend it a little, please. Just fix what's bad and try to be good. And I quote to them, Ben Ferencz, the wonderful prosecutor. He's still alive and he's very bright still. And
prosecutor from Nuremberg.
Yes, he was a prosecutor in Nuremberg. And when he was growing up, his immigrant father would sit him and his sister down. They were young children every night at dinner and say, what have you done for humanity today? They had to do something good every day, walking a dog, opening a door for an old lady, carrying a parcel, picking up trash. And what I tell these children is that you can do that every day. Get into the habit of kindness, and it might save you.
I would go a step further and say every one of us need to do something kind every day, because I think sometimes, the older you get, people forget. So let's all make that. If you're, everyone who's participating.
I don't agree with you. I think I'm much nicer now than when I was young. No, I think when I was young, I was much more into my career and being successful and all that. As you get older, suddenly things crystallize and you realize what's really important. And the human connection is the only thing that matters.
Yeah. Cheryl, more and more states are adopting legislation. We talked about, a little bit about the New Hampshire and Massachusetts. But what are some of the ways that the Butterfly Project's been used to provide that education? Hundreds of thousands of students are obviously experiencing it. And I know that one of the ADL staff painted a butterfly when she was in elementary school, and it left a deep impression on her, which I think is an example of, it's a data point to the success of the work.
It is astounding and just the most motivating and heartwarming experience when now adults who had practiced and been involved with the Butterfly Project as a student comes back and says, I remember doing this, I will never forget this, and now I'm working in the field. And it's incredibly inspiring. And, really, Kati and Barbara, listening to both of you and really talking about this connection to this work. And I believe the Butterfly Project, because it's through the arts, is a softer way in. It's almost, for me, it almost tricked me to get involved. And then I realized how important and incredibly meaningful it could become when we create a sanctity around the moment of painting butterflies. Our project stems from the poem, The Butterfly, written by Pavel Friedman at Theresienstadt, at Terezin. And we had the incredible, I just know, we say Beschert, like there are so many moments that come through in the Butterfly Project. The incredible life-changing experience for me to work with Ella Weisberger of blessed memory, who was a child prisoner at Terezin, and she was the cat in the children's opera Brundebar, and she was also a student of Friedel Dicker Brandeis. So I had the chance to spend almost 5 years with her. We traveled and journeyed back to Terezin. We get to then share her story in our documentary, Not the Last Butterfly. And so that, softer way in, I think, really pairs beautifully with the Holocaust resources that are through literature and through testimony. And it's a wonderful experience to learn from our teachers how they very creatively intersect our work with what they are really involved in presenting to their students. And we have kindergarten through 4th grade. We work with literature, with several books, and then in the introducing the testimony and using the personal story of our biography cards of the children. And actually we invite 2nd gen and survivors to be in touch with us so that we can make more personal biography cards of the children in their families that were murdered. So I just want to put that out there too, that our work has become much more focused in on the personal story and on building that library of biography cards of the children. And I think that that's what helps the students today to know that they're working on something that's about young people, and of course the broader history of the Holocaust and everyone that was affected. But I'm really sure that this, having the multiple interdisciplinary combination is the secret sauce to really making an impact.
For people who want to bring the Butterfly Project to their school, what's the best way to do it?
Reach out to us. It's the butterflyprojectnow.org. There's a lot of butterfly projects on the internet, but that will come up if you put the word now in there. And we'll walk teachers. We get calls from students. We get calls from 2nd gen organizations, schools. And, everyone has a lot of questions at first. Then they spend a little time, and we will walk everyone through the process of using our resources or our recommended resources like ADL and Facing History. And we work together with everything you can imagine. And then sometimes there's questions about the logistics of the ceramics. That's my pleasure to talk with everyone about that and to encourage them to, really be bold. And, I love the sanctity that, we create a quiet moment where the student, before they paint, they say the child's name of who they're painting for. Mm-hmm. And, we often put on music like Schindler's List just to sort of quiet everyone down, focus on what you're really doing. And they take those biography cards home to their families, and the butterflies remain at the school. And then the hands-on, the film, the literature, but then there's the memorial piece and the legacy that they know that butterfly that they created matters and, is a symbol of hope and remembrance.
It's fabulous. Barbara, you're working with college students, and something you said earlier kind of struck me, which was, that encountering people who know nothing about the Holocaust or, never even heard of it. And there's been multiple studies, polls, data out in the last few years that nearly 2/3 of young adults are unaware of the Holocaust. So, maybe tell us a little bit about from your perspective, how do programs, well, what everyone here is doing, but also like the Butterfly Project and these kind of art creative experiences, how does that really improve understanding? And I don't know if you've got a story to tell about this, but I am curious about how do you reach someone who's they're an adult, they're in college, and they know nothing about this. For us, we're living it. Gotti obviously experienced it. But there's definitely a big population out there that know almost nothing.
Well, I think you have to believe that you can reach them. It is about the human connection, about the empathic connection, imagining yourself in that situation. But it's really something that Father Patrick Dubois, who started doing his research in Eastern Europe with the killing fields in Poland and the Ukraine, trying to track what happened with the Einsatzgruppe and say, how can you look at another human being and not see another human being? This is all about connecting our common humanity. I just wanted to show, this is a reproduction, the poem with a picture of the butterfly in I Never Saw Another Butterfly, which has been so emblematic of the children at Terezin. I know I sing with the choir, Cole Emmanuel at Temple Emmanuel, and we sang a lovely choral version a number of years ago. But basically, students, I had to turn students away last fall, and I'm teaching the course again because it was this coming fall, because it was such a profoundly meaning experience. People came knowing that they needed to know. I mean, I'm sure that there are students on campus who couldn't care less and don't want to come, but I'm interested in the students who do want to come, and hopefully igniting lights, little lights that will go out, doing a play, bringing people in. I want to just say a couple of things. First of all, the emphasis this time on resilience and courage and tenacity and determination, on the activities at Terezin, like the Defiant Requiem, as has been called by Mari Sidlin, and Raphael Schechter, who's conducting people who haven't eaten, but still they're singing from memory Verdi's Requiem. I want to talk about the artist Samuel Bach, who's a survivor of the Vilna Ghetto and lives in the Boston area and paints magnificent canvases, which are so evocative of his memories, of his experience, and just how committed he is to that artwork. I want to talk about Mark Ludwig and the Terezin Music Foundation. Mark just wrote a fabulous book called Our Will to Live, the Terezin Music Critiques of Victor Ullmann and illustrations by Terezin artists. Mark started the Terezin Music Foundation, which is not just about honoring the legacy of the artists, the musicians, the painters, the poets, the writers at Terezin, but to encourage the creation of artwork today by artists who are similarly speaking out, working against oppressive regimes. And he really intersected with one of my students, because I had a student who's a violinist. And for final project, I encouraged them, they could write a research paper if they wanted to, but I encouraged them to do an artistic response. So I had a couple of students who filmed a scene from Charlotte Delbo's Who Will Carry the Word. They were sitting at their kitchen table, a friend filmed them on an iPhone, and it was a riveting performance. I had another student who's a museum school student who made a cranky, this painting that you rolled, and it was almost like watching a landscape through a train window, and it was documenting this person's journey to Terezin. But I had another student who was a violinist, and she said, I would really like to play a piece that was written at Terezin. So I said, let me connect you to Mark Ludwig, Terezin Music Foundation, because he's a brilliant viola player. So Mark was wonderful. He and Sophie connected, and he suggested Gideon Klein's Lullaby, which actually wasn't a piece that Klein composed. It was from a nigun that I think was a Hasidic nigun that was from the Ukraine, that was also sung in Palestine before it became Israel, in Germany, and he re-orchestrated it in Terezin in 1943. So Sophie's standing there playing her violin, doing Gideon Klein's piece. And it was, there were others, short stories, poetry. I had students, another time I taught the course, who, based on a story of two sisters, one of whom survived, one didn't, they were dancers, and so they choreographed a very beautiful piece. So I guess the answer is, I create a course that I hope will be compelling, that I hope will be welcoming to students wherever they're coming from, however much knowledge or little knowledge. But I don't think anybody can be alive today and experience what's happening in this country, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Ukraine right now specifically, and not understand the need to know, and the need, I love what you said, Kati, about asking people to do one kind thing, one act of kindness every day, because it adds up. And so I feel my teaching my courses, my directing a play, it's not going to change the world, but perhaps if all the people who see the plays and take the courses can then go out and share what they've learned, but also be inspired to become Holocaust educators in some way themselves. You know, I have one student who's going to be working at a synagogue in community outreach and social activism. So, I mean, you just never know what impact you're going to have. And Cheryl, I want my students in the fall to do the butterfly project. So can we do it as college students too? Because I would love to do that.
Yes,
So
we have 15 universities that work with us. I'd really love that.
I would love it too. I think
One
it'd
of
be
my
very
board
special.
members is a Tufts alum, so he was super psyched. So yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
All right, you guys are connected for bringing Butterfly Project to Tufts.
Well, I'd also like to connect with Kati about some of the plays that I could bring into my course in the fall.
Absolutely.
That'd be
Absolutely.
fantastic.
So we're running we're running towards the tail end of our
Oh no.
no, we're not done yet, Kati. I have sort of one question, but maybe really for all three of you. We've seen in the last number of years record numbers of anti-Semitism. ADL has been tracking, incidents of anti-Semitism for, I don't know, decades at this point. The increase is happening here. I think sometimes we think in New England we're immune. We are not immune. Talk for maybe just a minute or so, really short, on how Holocaust education plays a role in combating anti-Semitism. And we'll do like super quick. We'll go Cheryl, Barbara, Kati.
I was hoping I'd get a chance to talk about one of the things our educators found on our education team is that they believe they were leaving the students in a very dark place. And we had to address what is it that we will encourage the students. And of course, it's about becoming an upstander and looking at the courage that was displayed during the Holocaust by Jews, by non-Jews, by artists, by anyone that was resisting. And that, as Kati said, it starts with a little thing, a little move that they're going to make, and that they do not have to feel that they're alone in this world doing it. And it becomes a habit and a pattern. And, we talk about gratitude, resilience, courage, kindness, and the difference that it makes by a lot of the upstander stories that we will share. And then I believe it arms the students with examples of, I want to be like that, not just a bystander.
Barbara.
Thank you. I completely agree with you, Cheryl. I think it's very important to empower students not just students, but to empower people to know that little acts can make a huge difference. And you can't just confront ignorance and say, I can't do anything about it. I mean, hate comes out of ignorance. It comes out of a lack of education. And we have to just do anything we can to combat it, to be forceful, to support ADL and ADL's efforts, but really to also emphasize the positive, the hopeful, the light, and not just dwell in the darkness. And actually, in student comments, that was one of the things that they responded to so much. They said they loved the emphasis on the power of art and how it sustained people in those dark times, and how people wanted to do their theater and write their poetry and do their paintings. And we have Michael Gruenbaum, who lives in Brookline, who's a survivor of Terezin, was also in Brundabar, who wrote his memoir. I love the title. It's Somewhere There Is Still a Sun. And that was from a letter that his mother wrote, because she and Michael and his sister all survived. And that was from a letter she wrote when they had lost everything, including her husband, their father. She said, somewhere there is still a sun. We will make a home. I mean, we have to just believe that there is a sun, there is good, there is kindness, and we have to just fight the hatred and the ignorance and the divisiveness in this country and in the world.
Kari.
I always tell the children that I truly believe that 10% of people are really kind. 10% are pretty awful, you know, the deniers and the perpetrators. Unfortunately, 80% are sheep, and it's the sheep who scare me. It's the sheep we need to reach. And I tell the children that you cannot be a sheep because the sheep follow the bully. It's easier to follow the bully. To follow the good, you actually have to do something. To follow the bully, you just stand by and do nothing. And I always encourage them to stand up and be counted and be hopeful and to change the world with kindness on a daily basis. And very much art is part of it. They can express it in every possible way, but not all children can express it in art. You even have to talk to the football players. You know, they are human too. But, you know, you have to reach them all. And I truly believe that if you explain to them that the 80% sheep are the danger, I get letters from kids saying, I'll never be a sheep, I promise. And that's what I'm trying to reach. I'm trying to get them involved, to care.
Thank you. So we're basically at time. I just want to make one comment, and then I'm going to give Kari. I'm going to give you the last word for you to just tell everyone what's your final message to the audience on Yom Hashoah 2022. But before I do that, there is a bit of a theme here about making the ability of one person to make a difference. And you know, as the ADL director in New England, it reminds me of my predecessor, Lenny Zakem. And Barbara, you knew him quite well, but Lenny had a belief that one person can actually make a difference. And if we can reach one person, it replicates. And so it's a very important philosophy, almost a working philosophy at ADL, particularly ADL New England, where Lenny was such an important leader and role model for so many. But it's something that is part of my DNA. But I know that for all of the ADL staff, it is too. It's a part of the work that we do, and each one of you is doing that. So I just wanted to say it because it really does remind me of that. Kari, what's your final message for this audience as we wrap up?
Now, when you're talking about this audience, who am I talking to now? You or the children or everybody?
I think we're talking to everybody.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to close with one thing that I truly believe is in the power of one. The woman who saved my life was a Christian peasant girl who hid me in her farm in an attic at possible danger to herself and her family, but she saved my life. And she saved my life, my 4 sons' life, my 4 granddaughters' life, and God knows how many other people. That one act of kindness has saved a generation of people. And what I tell children is that each of us have a power of one in our hands. And it's what we do with our lives today that we can affect everything. And this is one of the reasons why I speak, because I feel that I have to. Because if I can reach one child every time or one person every time, turn one hatred into acceptance and possibly love every time, I've been a successful human being. And maybe that's why I survived.
You are an incredible human being.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you. I'm glad you think so. Thank you.
I do. So before I thank our guests here, I just want to recognize and just thank the planning committee, Dina Chadowitz, Michael Denning, and Michael Wilheimer, and my ADL colleagues, Darren Preston Mashin, Becca Levitt, and Penny Schuker, all of whom worked on getting us together on this important day and helping to get everybody here for this conversation. And lastly, I want to thank again Cheryl, Barbara, and Kari for being with us and sharing their moving stories with us. You know, Cheryl talked about courage. It takes courage to actually do this work, but also talk about it so openly. So we should all be inspired by that. We're now going to return to the students who are going to lead us in a commemoration of the victims of the Holocaust. And as we learned today, the Butterfly Project was inspired by a poem written by a young child named Pavel Friedman in the Terezin concentration camp in April 1942, 80 years ago. It may sound like a long time ago, but it's really not when you think about history. So keep that in mind. We're honored to have our students read this moving and haunting poem as we commemorate the victims of the Holocaust and commit ourselves to remembrance. And one more thing, and that's to do at least one act of kindness every single day. Thank you for being with us today.
The butterfly.
The last, the very last.
So richly dazzling yellow.
Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone.
Such a yellow.
Is carried lightly way up high.
It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye.
For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto.
But I have found what I love here. The dandelions called it.
And the white chestnut branches in the court.
Only I never saw another butterfly.
That butterfly was the last one.
Butterflies don't live in here, in the ghetto.